It's nice to meet you all. I'm Claire. I'm a VP on the GSV Ventures team, and today I'm beyond excited to have Kristen DiCerbo, who's the Chief Learning Officer at Khan Academy. And I'm sure, as all of you have heard, Khan Academy has made massive strides in embedding and being at the forefront of embedding AI into education. They recently launched Khamigo a couple of weeks ago, and we're here to discuss what it looks like for a big edtech company to partner with OpenAI, what it means to build in AI into an existing learning infrastructure, and what it means for the broader education and learning space. So excited to have you, Kristen.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to all of you for joining today.
Yeah, so I'd love to kick off with a quick intro just for the audience to just learn a little bit more about you and your background and your journey to Khan Academy and what your focus is there.
Great. So I've been at Khan Academy for about 3 years now. I kind of started in my education career as a school psychologist in schools in Arizona, where I still live, and saw a lot of things that made me think that we needed technology to be able to support learners and to be able to think about how we can advance learners, particularly those who have learning difficulties, but really all students. And so I have spent time actually with the Cisco Networking Academies was my first foray into educational technology, and then was at Pearson for about 8 years, started as a research scientist doing work on simulation-based assessment and games-based assessment, and then moved into leading a team of learning designers. And about 3 years ago, Khan Academy was looking for their first chief learning officer, and so I bring to that role a background in educational psychology, thinking about research science, but also how to embed all of that into digital learning and thinking about how we build our offerings to incorporate what we know about how people learn.
That's amazing. So obviously, Khan Academy has been a massive household name for many years now. Even I grew up using it. And you all have been at the forefront of advancing access in education. And again, on the AI front, have just recently launched Khamigo. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about what exactly Khamigo is, what the tech is, and why it's different?
Yeah, so as we have at Khan Academy tried to think about supporting learners, we have always been a little bit stuck with the kinds of interactions we could have on our platform. So we could ask your typical multiple choice questions, we could ask open-ended questions, but they had to have very specific math answers, for example. So we could say, it's 2 + 2, you can put 4 in the blank, but we weren't able to really have open-ended questions. And more importantly, we could never really get at those math things like, why is this your answer? Why did you do it that way? Explain what you're doing and have any kind of interaction about that. And we know from folks like Mickey Chi, who's at Arizona State and researches in cognitive psychology, that interaction is really important for learning. And so the first thing we did as we were thinking about the new tool was thinking about how we could have those interactions with the AI, then how those dialogue-based interactions can help us then embed what we could do already. So Khamigo right now, if you are on the Khan Academy page and you have the specific, you're working on a specific problem, you can engage with the tutor to actually work through that. Now, one of our big things, and if you've heard me at all talk about this before, is that we don't want it to tell the student the answer. We want it to act like a good tutor. And so we went through a lot of work just to walk it through step by step. If a student says, I'm stuck, it says, well, what do you think the first step might be? And if they don't know, thinking about walking them through it as opposed to giving them the answer at the end. So that tutor piece was the first thing we did. But we have 2 other pieces that we're working on as well. The second one is a bunch of activities that we have right now just on a page that's a sandbox, basically, to see what's going to work and what students like. So there we have things like write a story together, debate, things where it's really building on the interactive nature of what the large language models let us do. And then the third thing that we just actually released a bunch of last week was a bunch of teacher tools. So things like create a lesson hook with the teacher. So a teacher's looking for something that's really engaging and sparks students' curiosity at the beginning of a lesson. they can work with Khamigo to help draft what that is. Writing a rubric. So what does it look like to design what that rubric might be? So write a lesson plan. So thinking about what are the things that teachers do that having a dialogue with an AI might help them do. So those are kind of the three things that we're focused on now.
Yeah, it seems like you all are spanning both not only student workflows, but teacher workflows, and obviously those two things go hand in hand. We've obviously seen a ton of chatbots in the education space pop up, everything from Duolingo Max to Checkmate that was announced on Monday. How are you all thinking about where you all differentiate in this space, and why is it different than an educator just going to ChatGPT, for example?
Yeah, so a lot of what we've done, the difference between, for instance, just the raw ChatGPT and what we're doing is we're already putting in a lot of design and guardrails around the prompts that we create. So the prompts are what guide the model and how to answer. And so that work is an important piece of how it's different than just the raw ChatGPT output. It's actually working with you. We've built in how to act like a tutor. We've built in what does a good lesson hook look like? What does a good rubric look like? That's already behind the scenes there. So the person interacting with it doesn't have to be creating those prompts themselves and thinking about what that looks like. So that's a big piece of it. The other piece we have is it is embedded with our Khan Academy content. So it already, if you're using it, it already knows, here's the problem you're working on, here's the unit you're in, here's the course you're in, and all of that is then passed through to the chatbot. So it's aware of that whole context that you're in and knows then better how to react and respond.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I know we only have 20 minutes, so I do also want to shift gears a little bit to the OpenAI partnership, which is really exciting. I know we have a lot of edtech founders and people building in the edtech space in the room. And so I'd love to also hear a little bit more about that journey to partnering with OpenAI. You all released Khamigo, I believe, the same week or same day that GPT-4 came out. So you all were early birds. Tell us a little bit more about what that partnership looks like and what it's like to partner with OpenAI on moving the education mission forward.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of an advantage because they did come to us last September and say, we've just finished training GPT-4. Would you be interested in working with us because of our reach and our name in the as a nonprofit in the space? So we, Sal Khan and I, were able to play with it a little bit back in September, and we're, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So we did a couple of things on our side. We had a couple big hackathons. We have Khan Academy, we're about 250 folks in the organization. We have about 100 engineers. We had a week where we had all 100 engineers just working on thinking about what this could be. What are the possibilities as we tried to narrow that down. But in terms of actually partnering, we found that there were some really nice ways that we could work with them. They were interested in thinking about, for example, how to make the model better at math. So one of the things we did was some reinforcement learning, where basically we took about 100 Khan Academy problems and the big tutor prompt we use and actually worked through where they would have the model give a response and we would rate it from 1, never say this again, to 7, hey, this is a great response, and then give our ideal response. And we did that, over the interactions, and that's all actually now baked into the GPT-4 model that is publicly available. That reinforcement learning was part of working with that. So working with them was really interesting. They also told us a lot about how to write good prompts. So the first thing you do when you're trying to write a prompt, it turns out the best thing you can do is tell it what persona to take on. So say like, you are an empathetic Socratic tutor, or you are a mathematician, or whatever that is that you want it to be, and actually giving it that persona first really influences then what you give it back on the side. So our storytelling prompt, for example, one of the first things is, you are a storyteller, and what does that then mean in terms of how it gives it a response back? So writing that, then telling it what to always do, what to never do, and then getting into some of the specifics. And they taught us a lot about if you give too long of a prompt, it starts to forget what you've been telling it. So all of those things are really important, and we didn't know. We'd never written a prompt in our lives. So a lot of that, but all of that is now starting to also become public knowledge. We want to share how we've written prompts with the community and letting folks kind of build on that knowledge. But all of that was part of the partnership and working with them.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think one thing that we always come back to, especially as investors and thinking about the edtech space, is that really, for AI to be successful, you essentially need two things, data and distribution, and you all have been a leader in both of those things. And so I imagine the outputs that you all have created are going to be much better than, for example, completely training or putting ChatGPT or GPT-4 into the wild. For those founders in the room, I'm sure they're wondering, were there any challenges in maybe even retrofitting a lot of the AI tech into what you already had? Is it better to start blank and build something AI native? How did you all build AI into your product?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a challenge when you have an existing product and you need to think about how to build something with it. We actually just came off of a 2-year project where we ported our entire code base from Python to Go, which was brutal, and also went from a monolith to microservices for those who are in the tech space. So we felt like we had a good foundation because we had done that, but still it is thinking about how to move quickly when everything you touch is impacting 100 other things that are already built and on the site. So that's taking a lot of care. So if you're a startup and starting this early, you are in a better place. So you can build from scratch, thinking about what this is. But it's definitely having to think about how does this then fit in. And we're still at the place now where we have to think about, okay, we've got this chat happening here. How does that fit into and count as evidence for mastery, for example, in our mastery system? How does that interaction get part is even of our metrics about how long someone's spending on the site and all of those things that we monitor? How does all of the data on the back end connect to each other and work through? So lots of challenges when you've got an existing system you're trying to hook into.
Yeah. Fast forward to today, I think we're a couple weeks after the rollout of Khamigo, and I don't think it's not public yet, but what are you all seeing in terms of just student usage? What functionalities do they enjoy? What are they not using as much as you all expected? Would love any learnings.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of different ways that folks have, that we're offering this right now in a what we call Khan Labs, kind of a research space. So on one hand, we have folks who can, independent learners, is what we generally call the group, who can come in with a donation and get access. We do still have a pretty big wait list for that. We're letting folks in a little bit at a time. And then we have a group of districts and schools that are partners with us already, who are largely in historically under-resourced communities. And we've given access to them for free as part of our learning and what we're trying to understand how people are using this. So one of the interesting things for me on our data dashboard is I click on, we have this different student segments, and I like to just click on what those students in the districts are doing and seeing how their reactions are. So the biggest thing they're using, not surprisingly, is the tutor on our exercise pages. So when they're working on exercises, working through that. And I was actually visiting, there's a school in Phoenix where I'm based that is testing it out. And I visited there last week, and they use Khan Academy quite a bit as part of their part of their daily work that they do in class. And so what often happens is a student gets stuck, and then they put up their hand, and they sit there for about 5 minutes, waiting for the teacher to get free from somebody else to come over. And so I could actually see them and was like, hey, let's see if Khamigo can get you unstuck. What are you doing? And so that was really exciting to see that happen. So that's kind of the first piece, is just doing those exercises, getting the help when you're stuck, whether that's in class or at home or where that is. The second most used thing they do is this write a story with them. We craft a story, and it's set up like that game you may have played at a party or with your kids where you write, it just tells you what kind of parties I go to, where you write 2 sentences and someone else writes 2 sentences and you write 2 sentences and it ends up being the story. And so we have that just set up through, the prompting system to do, and the kids seem to love that. They, are just fun writing, and it kind of, we have it so it does prompt and ask them for, hey, tell me more about this character. What are their interests? What are they doing? And tell me about this setting. Make it so it feels like you're there. So it is also teaching good story writing in terms of plot and character and settings as part of it. But the kids just like writing stories too.
Write with you, not write for you.
Right, exactly.
And so what are some of the, on the teacher front, are you seeing kind of certain features that are also being used more than others?
Yeah, so the teacher stuff, we just did most of the launching last week, so we don't have lots of learnings. But one of the reasons we did that launch was the first couple of weeks we were demoing, and we had just this lesson plan for humanities piece, and we were demoing to some instructional coaches in schools, and they were the ones who said, hey, could it write a rubric? Our teachers really struggle with writing rubrics. And we were like, let's see if it can. And we started drafting prompts together, like in this meeting, to see if it could do it. And we thought, hey, this is coming out pretty well. So those kinds of things are the exciting things that we think we're seeing, but we're still in early days on a lot of the teacher tools.
Yeah, I think talking about the classroom, we've seen a bunch of school districts actually ban ChatGPT, and there's mixed reception on the technology, and with very strong reason. There's inherent ethics and bias problems. It hallucinates. What is different about Khamigo, and what are you seeing around teacher reception of the tool?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that the people who banned it did it because they didn't understand it and needed to do something immediately. But what we've done is then had conversations with districts about what are the safety and security measures we have. We talk about the moderation API that we use, and how we set the thresholds for things like violence and hate and what those look like. We talk about this feature that we have where you can see, the teacher and the parent can see the students' chat transcripts. And so they can actually look and see what those conversations are and what they look like. So all of those are things. And then we talk about how we've locked it down so it won't give students the answers, and they can try it out and see if it works. So but I think it's those conversations, and teachers and district administrators right now just, this is not their expertise. This is not what they came into. And honestly, we're only about 6 months ahead of where they are. But it's those conversations, listening to what their concerns are and thinking about how we can address them, that's going to then be the thing that helps them feel more comfortable with the technology and move forward with it.
Yeah, and you all are so well positioned, teacher and student as end user. I guess on the topic of teachers, sorry. As someone who has worked in a school setting, how are you thinking, or how is Khan Academy thinking about making sure that teachers are not a part of that group that gets left behind in this technological inflection point? How are you all making sure that teachers onboard onto the teacher tools and this gets widespread use in classrooms?
Yeah, I think it's not only the teachers left behind, but also just the digital divide, and thinking about how do we make sure this gets in the hands of the students who wouldn't normally have it, and where they get. There's a, example, New York City Board of Ed has banned ChatGPT, but there are private schools in New York that are literally offering prompt engineering courses as electives in the fall. And so that just demonstrates how there's the potential for this divide to be really significant. And so we are doing things like thinking about how we offer it to those schools for free and how we can move them along. But on the teacher side and teacher onboarding, which is your question, it is starting to think about how can we get teachers to understand this. And part of this, I'll give a shout out to the next session after this, having teachers experiment with writing prompts, having teachers experiment with actually engaging with it. And I think those are the biggest things that are going to help them feel comfortable, is actually working with it. The interesting thing, though, is there's a survey recently, and I don't want to quote the exact percentage, but it was a pretty significant, something in the 50 to 60% range of teachers who reported actually using ChatGPT weekly. And so I think they're starting to see it for their own tasks, and then it's how do we apply it in schools in a safe way. Yeah,
I know we only have maybe 30 seconds. Lightning question. It's just, what are you most excited about for the future of education beyond Khan Academy, and how are you thinking about the future of AI in education?
I think the most exciting thing is that we actually don't know the future right now.
Yeah.
The pace of change is crazy, and if you're in this space trying to keep up with it, it feels pretty overwhelming. But it's a really exciting time to think about, hey, can technology finally get to the place where it can support those students who don't have a qualified teacher in the classroom, who need a little extra help, who are working on their homework and need some support, and finally make that transition to being able to scale what we know is good teaching and good education beyond where we've been able to with just a single teacher in a classroom of many, and being able to provide that good education to learners everywhere.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you,
Give it a
Claire.
round of applause.